It's hard to make a game, and it's hard to make any kind of software. Things go wrong, things get confusing, and many times I've had to switch my role from designer to detective just to figure out what in the world is going on. Many years ago, I was working on the video game Celebrity Deathmatch, which is a fighting game amongst various licensed celebrities. And I was working on Mr. T, and I thought, I'll make Mr. T's punch a little bit faster. So I loaded him up in the editor, made his punch a little bit faster, and then I tried it in the game, but I couldn't really tell the difference. So I thought, well, maybe that was too subtle of a difference. I'll make it like 10 times faster. So I tried that, but I couldn't tell any difference there either. And I thought, that's strange. Let me make something really noticeable. I'll make it like 20 times slower. So I tried that. I loaded that up, but I still couldn't tell the difference. That's weird. Now, this punch I'm talking about, it created some boxing gloves around his fist. So I deleted the boxing glove object entirely. Then I loaded it up, did the punch, and it seemed the same as always, and it still had the boxing glove. So then I deleted the entire file of Mr. T. We'll see how that goes. So then I loaded it up, and he was still there. Now, how is that possible? So I went to our lead technical artist. His name was Ray. And I told him, hey, I deleted Mr. T's file and he's still in the game. So what's going on? And Ray said, no, that's impossible. You must have deleted the wrong file. I thought, okay, maybe. He was saying maybe there's some other Mr. T on my computer, and I just deleted the wrong one. I don't know about that, but maybe. So I searched for everything called Mr. T in the entire folder that is used to build the game and deleted all instances of it, every kind of Mr. T file there was. Files that are outside of that folder that are laying around on my computer can't possibly be used when making a build of the game, but just to be safe, I searched all of those too and deleted all of those as well. So there was nothing Mr. T related on my computer at all. Then I made a build and Mr. T was still there. And I told Ray that, and he said, what? And then I said, Mr. T cannot be destroyed by any craft that we here possess. And he said, what again? He said, that's impossible. There's no way you can delete all the Mr. T files and then have him still be in the game. It doesn't make any sense. And I said, well, why don't you try it, Ray? Why don't you delete Mr. T on your computer and see how it goes? So he tried it, and Mr. T was still there. I told you, Ray. So now we're stumped. I'm stumped. Ray's stumped. How is it possible? How can you have an asset that is still in the game, even though all possible copies of that have been deleted? So I put on my detective cap and I thought about it. And then I remembered something that the lead programmer told me a few months earlier. I remember because I called it Memory Soup, and I thought that was a funny name. Now, I'm not a programmer, so I'm probably going to garble this. Bear with me. I remembered that the lead programmer told me that there are certain assets that are used by many different characters and that we don't need to have a separate copy of that attached to each of the characters. That would be wasteful and confusing. So when a character is loaded, it will look for everything it needs everywhere in memory. If it needs an asset, it won't just look at things that are directly attached to it. As long as whatever it needs is somewhere floating around in memory, then it's going to be okay. And I called that the memory soup. So now back to Mr. T. I said, Mr. T has to be floating around in the memory soup somewhere. When Ray wondered, well, how does this concept help us? And I thought, well, some things go into the memory soup directly, but other things maybe are poured into the soup from a container. So maybe if Mr. T were inside a container, that's why we can't find him, because the things that are getting loaded into the soup, all the file names, contains the things that are directly put there and the names of the containers, but maybe there can be things hidden inside those containers. And so I thought, well, what are some containers that we know about that this game uses? And I don't know a lot of the technical workings of the game, but one thing I did know that used that concept is particle systems. When a particle system is loaded, it often contains several sub-effects that are part of it and linked to it that are inside it. And we don't see the file names of those sub-particle systems directly because they're inside the container. So I thought maybe Mr. T is inside a particle system? Now that's crazy and doesn't make any sense. But we looked and it turns out he was. Mr. T was inside a particle system. What in the world? How did that happen? I still don't know how it happened. And it's totally random that I would even think of that or discover it. But it's a good thing I did, because what it means is that we were actually using some stray decoy copy of the Mr. T file rather than the one that we thought that we had been editing. So thankfully we fixed that. And now let's take a quick break where I tell you about a quick board game I designed called Flash Duel. It's got a lot of game modes, a lot of characters, a lot of abilities, and you can play it fast. You can play a game in like 5 minutes and then play it again. It supports 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2 teams, or even 1 versus many, where one person plays as the powerful dragon. And inside the small box is an even smaller box, which is a travel version that you get for free. You can get Flash Duel at sirloingames.com. My next confounding tale was when I worked on the game Street Fighter HD Remix, which was a sequel to the game Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, also known as Super Turbo. So that means on day 1 of the HD Remix project, we started with the codebase for Super Turbo. I was working on the character Vega, who many players refer to as Claw because he has a different name in the US and Japanese versions of the game, but when you say Claw, people know which character you mean. I was concerned with his wall dive loop. He has a move where he flies to one wall, then back to you, and if he hits you, he will knock you down. And while your character takes time to stand back up again, he has time to fly to the wall and back to you again and repeat that. And it's very difficult to know if you should block left or right. And you can kind of keep doing that. And the problem is, this was getting more and more dominant in tournaments, and it just looked stupid.
Damn, did I finally get his reversal or not? It looks like probably not. He doesn't do it. God. Damn guy is so frustrated with himself.
And I thought, enough is enough. Let's do something about this. So I wanted to test a change where the move was still good and it was still very fast going to the wall and back to you and still had a good hitbox and still the same damage and all of that. The only difference would be that it doesn't knock down. So that if he hits you with it, maybe he can get in one more hit, but he doesn't have time to repeat this, to go off the wall again and back to you. So I made that change to the code. I made it so that one specific move didn't knock down anymore. Then I loaded up the game, but it still knocked down. That's strange. Now, I'm no programmer, and all of this code is in assembly, which is very hard to deal with, but I know exactly how to do this. I know exactly what to change to make a move knock down or not knock down, and usually it works, but this time it didn't. So I went to the programmer who was sitting next to me, and I asked him for help. His name was Eric. He said he would be happy to help. He opened up the file on his computer, and I looked over his shoulder as he did that. He scrolled down in Vega's code to find the appropriate move, and then he looked at it for a second, and he said, there's your problem right there. The line of code that makes this move not knock down has been commented out. So it's not running, it's not doing anything. All you've got to do is make sure it's not commented out, and then your change will work fine. And I said, now, hold on a minute, a couple things. First of all, I did not comment it out. I don't think that could have happened, but let's say it did. The bigger problem here is I did not check in this file into the source code repository. So there is no possible way that you can have that on your computer. And he said, yeah, but I see it right here. I see the change that you made right here in front of me. I mean, look at it. Isn't this what you wrote in the code? And I looked at it and I said, yes, that is what I wrote. And he said, so then you checked it into version control then? And I said, no, I really didn't. And he said, So then we both sat down at our computers and we started solving the mystery. I think neither of us said anything for several minutes. We were both thinking, how is it possible? How is it possible that code that I wrote on my computer magically made its way onto his computer without me checking it into the server first? And the answer is, that is impossible. So there is some assumption we have somewhere that must be wrong. The code had to have already been there. Was it there this morning? Was it there yesterday? Was it there last week? And the answer to all those questions when I looked at the version history was no. The file hadn't changed in a long time, which actually makes it even weirder. And I think Eric must have discovered the same thing at about the same time, so we were both thinking about that. I thought, is the version control lying to us? Is there some way that this code got added in earlier, even though the version control doesn't seem to say it did? How can this code have already been in the file before I changed it without me being able to see it? And I finally realized how, by realizing that there's something special about Vega. Vega, who you remember some people call Claw, has two different states he can be in. He can either have his claw or his claw is knocked off. His moves look pretty similar whether he has his claw or not, except for the claw being missing, but in the game's code, he's actually treated as two different characters. His character file has a whole set of moves for when he has the claw, and then below that, a whole other set of moves for when he doesn't. So then I realized there's two separate gotchas here. The answer to the first riddle is that when I made my change originally, I accidentally edited the wall dive move for when he doesn't have his claw. Then when I loaded the game, by default, he starts with his claw, and so that version had not been changed, and that's why I didn't see anything different. But the second and more deeply confusing issue has to do with the claw section of the code. That's the section that Eric opened on his computer. So when he scrolled to that section, what he saw was not what I was looking at on my computer. I was accidentally looking at the no claw version. But if I had looked at the claw version of the move on my computer, what I would have seen is that yes, there is a commented out line of code in that section. It was there yesterday, a month ago, at the beginning of the project. It was always there. It was put there by the Japanese developers of Super Turbo. So what that means is that 15 or so years earlier, they had the same thought I did, and they tried the move knocking down and not knocking down. They decided to go with the version that knocks down, but they left the other one in, commented out. So by pure chance, I was trying to make exactly the same change, which would require exactly the same line of code that they put there. I just happened to accidentally type mine in the wrong section. I mean, what a crazy coincidence. I can't quite remember if Eric solved this at about the same time I did, but he probably did. The whole thing was so crazy and so confusing. If you're a developer and you've had a crazy, confusing coincidence of your own, why don't you share those examples with us in the comments below?